In Seafront Harbor, the tide brought in more than just salt. It delivered a letter with no address. A thick, cream envelope, sealed with an ancient anchor, smelling faintly of jasmine and decades of regret. Who wrote it? Who kept it hidden? And what kind of apology takes a century to find its way home? This isn't a simple love letter. It's a map to a truth that could finally heal a town. You won't believe where the jasmine leads. Tea liked to arrive before conversation in Seafront Harbor. It unfurled its steam like a soft flag of truce. On this particular morning, the air inside the tea leaf and whistle was scented with orange peel and something Lena Brooks could only call tidy. The smell of counters freshly wiped. The bell a heartbeat away from chiming. The cat with the tiny bell and soft MRRP keeping his usual perch by the display of scones. She was laying out porcelain cups in a straight line, as she did most mornings, because 3 quiet rows of cups made it easier to believe the day would pour smooth. When the front door banged open and Dottie Bloom blew in, trailing wind, tissue paper, and triumph. "Lena," Dottie cried. "The tide just delivered a better mystery than last week's crab parade." "If it's another bouquet order for a hermit crab, I'm still recovering," Lena said. But she was already smiling. Dottie's eyes shone the way the bay did on days when sun slipped its way under clouds. "No," Dottie said, lowering her voice as if she'd brought a jewel. An envelope. She set it on the counter like a delicate cake, thick cream paper, deckled edges. A red wax seal stamped with an anchor. It smelled not of Dottie's roses, but of jasmine. The scent round and clear as a bell. Earl Grey, the shop cat, lifted his head, gave a soft MRRP, and stepped closer with his usual dignified curiosity. His small bell chimed when he sniffed. Lena murmured. Jasmine and fresh, too. Not just a sachet that held on for dear life. That wax is old-fashioned, but the impress is clean. She turned the envelope. No address. No name. The only writing in a looping hand read, "Deliver with heart." Dottie clasped her hands. "Tell me this isn't romantic." "It could be," Lena said, because she never wanted to stomp on hope. "Or mysterious. Let's brew the facts." She set water back on the burner and leaned in to examine the writing. The letters had the slight shading of a fountain pen, strokes blooming at the beginnings and ends. Near the flap, a halo of lavender tinge smudged the paper, thin as breath. Lena inhaled again and caught the lemony lift of gum Arabic used in some inks. 3 neat invitations: Jasmine-Scented, fountain pen script, anchor seal. The beginnings of a map. Miles Harper's bicycle bell chirped outside, and a heartbeat later, he ducked into the shop. Mailbag slung like a sash, hair damp with fog from the harbor. "Morning," he said, surveying Dottie's posture. "Who died or got engaged?" "Neither, but I'm open to being proven wrong," Dottie said. She pointed at the counter. "Look." Miles leaned down, grinned, and said, "Anchor, fountain pen, handmade paper. And our town gossip vibrating at a frequency only gulls here. I should have brought popcorn." "Not popcorn," Mia Collins said, popping up behind Miles with her phone halfway to her face. "But a photo. This is a content opportunity." "Careful." Officer Rowan Hale's voice drifted from the doorway, calm, steady, amused. He paused there, letting damp from his jacket fall on the mat instead of Lena's floor. "Let's keep this by the book," he said. "If it's mail, it's private." "This one has no address," Dottie replied, the picture of innocence. "It's basically a shipwreck survivor." Agatha Reed slipped in quietly from the side door. A stack of returned library slips tucked under one arm. "An anchor seal," she said. "That's very old seafront. The lighthouse used one a century ago, if memory serves." "Of course memory serves in your case," Lena said. "You always tip." Agatha's mouth tucked into a pleased line. "I'll check the registry ledgers in the archive room." Elsie Parker breezed in next, clipboard in hand. A pencil tucked into her bun like a mast. "If anyone's looking for motives," she said. "We still have supplies from last week's calligraphy workshop. A dozen attendees. Dip pens everywhere. Maybe someone got sentimental and careless." "Or careful," Lena said, turning the envelope again. The wax impressed cleanly. Whoever pressed it had not hesitated. "We'll start with what we know," she said. Then she lined the clues in her head like her cups. Jasmine, anchor, fountain pen, and that lavender smear, like a thumbprint of cloud. She brewed tea because thinking went better with leaves and water. As she poured, Earl took one delicate paw and patted the envelope, as if to say, yes, this matters. Then he sat down squarely on Dottie's wrist so Dottie wouldn't be tempted to do anything rash. They agreed on the day's route quickly, the way the shop's regulars had learned to arrange themselves around a problem. They would stop by Clara Jensen's art studio. Clara knew every pigment sold within 50 miles. And then swing through the post office to ask about heritage stamps in play. If the anchor seal matched the historical one Agatha remembered, they would follow the path to the lighthouse. Patterns don't lie, Miles said, which he could not help saying when there were patterns to be pursued. And tea doesn't either, Lena said, pouring a quick cup for Dottie as she wrapped the envelope in brown paper for protection. She lifted the package to her nose one more time. Jasmine met her like a memory of summer, faint but direct. Outside, the boardwalk breathed salt air, and a gull skimmed so low over the water that its shadow broke apart on the ripples. Clara's studio perched above the row of shops, glass-fronted and warm even on gray days. When they climbed the narrow stairs, the smell of watercolor, paper, dampness, patience met them like a gentle handshake. Clara Jensen stood at the work table with a brush poised in her right hand, and her left hand steadying a wash. She had the fine-lined face of someone who spent a lot of time looking at light. "Come in," she said, and when she saw who it was, she smiled properly. "Lena, Miles." "And Earl," Mia said, because Earl had trotted along and now hopped onto the bench beneath the window, his bell giving a polite ring. "Earl," Clara said gravely, as if acknowledging an art critic. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "We're tracking a letter," Lena said, placing the wrapped envelope on a clean square of paper. She unfolded the paper thoughtfully, so Clara could take in the first impression. The way scent rose, the way the edges of the handmade paper rippled in the light. "It's unaddressed. Sealed with an anchor. Scented with jasmine. Written in fountain pen. There's a faint lavender tint near the flap," she added, as if a brush or finger left a whisper. Clara leaned in. The brush in her right hand trembled almost imperceptibly. She set it down before it spilled. "That's a lovely piece of paper," she said softly. "And yes, there's the lift in the ink. Steel nib, I'd wager, not gold." "Do you recognize the lavender?" Lena asked. "It could be a stray edge from a wash," Clara said. "Any of my students might have left a thumbprint like that. We keep a lavender set for floral pieces." She looked past them out the window, toward the lighthouse on the horizon. "Anchors make statements," she murmured. "You don't put one on a page. Unless you mean to hold someone." "You taught stationery design before the storms," Mia said, then flushed. "Sorry, that sounded like a documentary." No, it's all right," Clara said. Her voice had the careful softness of her brushwork. "Before the big storm took out the walkway, we did a series, paper, pigment, message. I encouraged people to choose a small symbol, if the words felt too risky. Sometimes a shape is easier than 'I'm sorry.'" Lena felt a faint string tug behind her breastbone. "Easier than I'm sorry." The words slid into her like a teaspoon dipping into sugar. "Thank you," she said. "You've given us what we needed." On the way down the stairs, Dottie said, "If that's not romantic, I'll eat a corsage." "And please don't eat anything that smells like wrist," Miles replied, making Mia snort. And Earl glanced back with complete cat disappointment. The post office thrummed with shoes, paper, and patience. Jamie Porter, earnest, a little overwhelmed, stood behind a counter covered in rubber bands. He glanced up, saw Miles, and straightened like a sapling facing the wind. "We're on a fishing expedition," Miles said kindly. He showed Jamie a sketch Mia had snapped, of the anchor seal and the lavender smudge. Jamie swallowed. "Oh, that? Not that exact thing, but, the heritage display by the lighthouse. We have a replica postbox for tourists," Jamie said, with an anchor stamp for postcards. "We used it during the festival." "Would someone have taken the stamp?" Mia asked. Jamie looked panicked. Borrowed. Borrowed it. For art. Maybe. I keep the drawers locked. Most of the time. Patterns don't lie, Miles said warmly. You're doing fine, Jamie. This helps. Rowan appeared at the far end of the room, having just reassured a woman about a missing package. That was one of Rowan's gifts. He could return the temperature of any room to normal, simply by standing in it. He lifted an eyebrow. Play nice, he said to Miles, who had never done otherwise in his life. They stepped back into the damp light. Dottie waited by the window, because post offices made her feel as if she needed to confess to stealing gum in 1968. She pounced. Forget the lighthouse, she said. I saw a man on the pier last week, pacing with a letter. He smelled of jasmine, I swear, and heartbreak. He had that sag about him like someone who remembered an anniversary a week late. Motion sickness smells similar, Lena said dryly. But she squeezed Dottie's arm. We'll keep our eyes open for him. Keep your nose open, Dottie corrected. Yours is a super weapon. Thank you, Lena said. I think. They made one more stop before letting the lighthouse pull them in. The archive room behind the library, where Agatha kept the past. Like some people keep herbs. Dried, labeled, waiting to flavor the present. She had already set out a ledger and a pair of cotton gloves. Registered seals, she said, tapping the page. Civic, commercial. The lighthouse entry is here, 1908. Anchor design. Kept in the desk in the tower office. She slid a photograph across the table. Grainy, but clear enough for Lena to make out the desk and the stationer's drawer beneath it. Your family, Lena said. Your grandfather. Agatha nodded. And my brother runs the light now. Tom. We haven't. Well, we've been on a hiatus. She made a wry face. There is no catalog section for estranged correspondence. I would have filled it. Maybe this letter belongs there, Mia said softly. A bridge, not a wall. Agatha looked at her surprised, then touched. Perhaps, she said. If you're going up, I'll make sure the walkway key is in place. Earl trotted ahead up the bluff path, his little bell bright against the wind, combing through the grasses. The lighthouse rose out of the rock, like an exclamation mark. White paint dulled by years of weather, restored in places by love. The iron railing on the last flight of stairs was cold. Lena's heart, in contrast, felt warm at the smell of salt and solder. The sea's signature on everything it touched. Tom Reed opened the door before they knocked, as if he had been listening to the weather try to tuck itself into rain. He was Agatha's brother, in the shape of bone and eye, but broader through the shoulders, built by wind and stubbornness. Not many visitors, he said. But you look like the sort that came with a reason. Lena held out the wrapped envelope, so he could see she had not harmed it. We think this is yours, she said. She peeled back the paper, letting the jasmine reach him. His gaze snagged on the anchor seal. He reached for it, then stopped, as if a rope had tightened, from his shoulder to his wrist. I wrote that, he said, and then laughed without joy. Once, maybe a dozen times. I only kept the one I sealed. To whom? Rowan asked gently. Tom's eyes softened and turned inward. Clara, he said. Clara Jensen. We argued after the storm about restoring the art festival. I said money should go first to the dock. She said art was a dock too, just for the heart. He looked toward the desk behind him. I came up here and wrote an apology. I sealed it. Then I put it in the old postal box and went back to fixing bulbs. The next day, I convinced myself I had imagined the apology. Pride makes you forget what the humble part of you did while it had the reins. Did you mean to send it? Miles asked softly. Or did you hope the box would hide it? Tom's mouth tipped in a weary half-smile. A little of both. Then the floods came. The desk swelled. The drawer stuck. There are 100 excuses up here. If you need one, I can lend you 3. We don't, Lena said gently. We only need directions back down the hill. Would you come with us? Tom looked past them, down the path, where the row of storefronts curved around the bay, like a string of beads. I could, he said. If she wants to see me. That's the thing about apologies, Lena said. You don't get to decide the reception. Only the delivery. He wore a jacket and an expression trying to grope its way toward lighter weather. And he followed them back to town. The rain finally committed to falling on the last bend, but not enough to make anyone hurry. Lena's shop glowed in the gray, the windows warm with amber light, the way lamps look when clouds part slightly. But the day never fully brightens. Inside, she set out a pot of tea that tasted like lavender laid gently over jasmine, the aftertaste of a promise. Clara arrived with her hair in a scarf, rain clinging to the ends, and a question already in her eyes. She saw Tom and stopped. The silence that followed was the kind that draws everyone else back a step. "I have something," Tom said. His voice wasn't gravel now, just human. He set the envelope down and nudged it toward her, the way someone pushes a cup across a table when they don't know if it will be accepted. Clara broke the seal gently, as if the anchor might smudge if she pushed too hard. She unfolded the paper that had held its breath for years, and now exhaled. She read aloud, "Your light kept the town safe, even when I turned mine out. I don't know how to fix everything. I only know I want to try." She stopped, swallowed, and looked up. "You were always better with hardware than with sentences," she said softly. "This is a very good sentence." "I should have sent it," Tom said. "I was stubborn." "We both were," Clara replied. She smoothed the paper with her palm, and Lena saw the way you can see a tide shift, even before the waterline moves, the exact moment something eased between them. "You don't have to know how to fix everything to begin," Clara said. "You make one cup of tea, then you make another." Rowan's smile tilted. "Consider the case closed," he said. And the jurisdiction of happy accidents expanded. Miles let out a breath. He didn't realize he had been holding. "Patterns don't lie," he murmured. "Not teasing this time. Things that belong together. Find a line." Dottie sniffled loudly and rummaged in her bag for a tissue, with the dramatics of a stage performer. Someone handed her one before she found it. "Even Earl is moved," she said, because the cat had hopped onto the counter, made a tight circle on the wrapping paper, and curled like a comma at the end of a sentence. Mia raised her phone, and then lowered it again, choosing sensitivity over documentation. "Would you like a picture?" she asked softly. "Just for you. Not for the internet." "Yes," Clara said. Tom nodded. They stood side by side, the letter between them, while Mia captured the shape of the moment. Two pairs of hands, a single page, a soft relief lighting both their faces. She sent it to them immediately. They drank Lena's jasmine lavender blend, which Lena described half-teasing as notes of second chances, with a quiet finish. Conversation loosened. The rain softened into a hush. Agatha spoke of lighthouse logs that could be arranged into a small exhibit. Letters that took the long way home. Elsie said she could make a corner of the festival for it. A ribbon wall. A map of origins and destinations. A place for people to stand and breathe differently for a moment. Dottie volunteered scented tissue paper and declared all visitors must leave with a pocket poem. No one told her no. Rowan, who rarely stepped outside the bounds of procedure unless kindness required it, lifted the envelope and slid it gently into a clear sleeve. "We'll keep this by the book," he said. "Just for a few days. Long enough to make sure everything is in order for the exhibit. Then it goes home." He set the sleeve back in front of Clara and Tom as though returning something more official than permission. "It already is home," Clara said, smiling at the paper as if it had walked itself to her door. Then, with a look at Tom that held years of mornings and quiet what-ifs, she added, "But yes, for the exhibit." Night arrived softly in Seafront Harbor, slipping in without knocking. People drifted out with umbrellas and gentle goodnights. Soon it was only Lena and Earl left in the warm hush of the shop. The rain tapped lightly at the windows, sounding like someone thinking. Lena wiped the counters, stacked cups 2 by 2, and set the kettle for one last pot. Not because she needed tea, but because the shop disliked falling silent before midnight. And truthfully, so did she. Earl hopped off the counter with a deliberate little thump, moving with the dignified gravity of a creature who believed he paid rent. He vanished behind the bin where Lena kept her extra tins. A soft clatter followed. Then the unmistakable patter of paws returning with purpose. The kind of purposeful trot that meant he had found something, and intended to make it everyone's business. He slipped a paw beneath the low shelf, flicked, and a thin rectangle of paper slid out, brushing the wood with a faint whisper. Lena bent down. "Oh? What did you find, Earl?" He answered with a small, triumphant MRRP, tapping the object twice, proud as a detective announcing a breakthrough. She picked it up. The paper felt instantly familiar, thick, cottony, touched by time. The deckled edges were the same. The cream tone, slightly darkened now, the same. And there it was again, the anchor seal. But the wax on this one had aged into a deep, wine-dark color, the shade of old secrets. She lifted it closer. No jasmine this time. No lingering perfume. Just the clean, neutral scent of paper that had waited too long in a quiet place. Across the front, written in the same slanted, unmistakable hand, were 5 words. To the one who kept the truth. Lena's pulse skipped. Not from fear, but from recognition. From the sense that another door had opened. A quiet one. A significant one. She held the envelope for a long moment, letting the weight of it settle. Another letter. Another mystery waiting in the wings. Earl sat beside her, pawing lightly at her sleeve, as if urging her to follow the thread wherever it led next. The front door clicked softly, and Miles poked his head inside. "I left my bike light," he said, then stopped when he saw her expression. "Oh," he breathed. "Is that another one?" Or, "Oh yes?" "Oh yes," Lena said quietly. Miles approached the counter, leaning his elbows beside hers. The closeness was easy, familiar. "Same seal," he murmured. "Same paper. Same handwriting." "And no jasmine," Lena added. "Not even a trace." "That's intentional." Miles read the line aloud. To the one who kept the truth. He let the words hang, weighing them. That's loaded. Could be gratitude. Could be accusation. Could be both. "Patterns don't lie," Lena said softly. He gave her a half smile, warm, knowing. "Yeah," he said. "They really don't." Footsteps approached the door. Rowan appeared in the frame, steady as ever, as if the building had requested his presence. Mia followed, having been outside photographing reflections of lamplight on puddles. Dottie's voice floated in from the sidewalk, declaring loudly that if the letter had even the faintest hint of citrus, she would assume scandal and dress accordingly at sunrise. Agatha arrived next, almost drawn magnetically by the sound of unfolding paper. She read the line on the front and inhaled slowly. "That phrasing," she said. "Interesting." Elsie, who never wasted an opportunity to schedule joy, lifted her pencil. "Should I pencil in mystery breakfast for tomorrow? I can bring muffins." Lena couldn't help but smile. "Yes," she said. "We'll brew the facts in the morning." Earl approved with a gentle MRRP, rolling onto the sleeve of the letter as if claiming temporary custody. Lena turned the sign to closed and stood by the window for a moment, the new envelope in her hands, the boardwalk glittering with reflections of the street lamps like scattered constellations. The sea muttered its nighttime secrets. Somewhere in the distance, a foghorn called and received its echo. In the glass, she saw herself, the counter behind her, and the soft shapes of her friends lingering nearby. People bound together less by mystery, and more by the quiet willingness to show up for one another. She returned to the counter and set the new letter beside a stack of saucers. A faint thread of jasmine still lingered in the air from the earlier envelope, but it was thin now, fading like the echo of gulls after they fly out of sight. That first letter had not led them to scandal or dramatic confession. Despite Dottie's enduring hopes, it had led them to something gentler, an apology that had waited for courage. Two people finding their way back to a truth they'd both stepped away from, and a door that had finally opened. That, Lena thought, was the kind of mystery worth following. Whoever wrote "Deliver with Heart" had understood something important. The heart doesn't need an address when the people around it are willing to listen. In the morning, there would be fresh tea, a new pattern to explore, and a letter addressed not to a name, but to an act. An act someone had witnessed, kept, or maybe even protected. Lena wrapped her hands around her still warm cup. letting the heat seep into her fingers. She thought of Tom turning the lighthouse key again, of Clara smoothing a long-lost apology flat with her palm, and of Earl with his tiny bell, always finding what mattered, exactly when it needed to be found. Tomorrow, she whispered, we begin again with scent and seal and script. And with whatever truth is waiting. Earl answered with a final, satisfied MRRP, closing his eyes as if settling into the next chapter already. Outside, the wind combed the sea, and Seafront Harbor breathed a deeper breath than the night before. If you're enjoying this cozy little mystery, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It helps our small storytelling corner stay warm and growing. Now, let's deep into the next chapter together.